Welcome, world. Welcome to Gem Talk. This is episode 1 for our new podcast. I am Frances, and I've got my co-host here with me, Aunt Wanda. Hey,
Hello.
Aunt Wanda.
Hey, Fran. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited.
Yes,
Gem Talk,
me
episode
too.
1.
Episode 1. So to give you guys a little bit of an introduction into who we are and why we're doing this, my name is Frances Lee, and I have a foundation and organization called Girls Embracing Manifestation. It actually goes by the acronym of GEM. And I do student development and character building specific to young ladies ages 10 to 18. And I am all about women empowering other women. And I've reached out to Wanda, Aunt Wanda, as we affectionately call her, because she is an empowered woman whose goal is to empower other women.
Yes.
Here we are. So today's topic, we are going to tackle the conversation. We'd like to have a cross-generational conversation about how do we as women hold one another accountable without tearing each other down. So I know, Wanda, you have some experience with that. We've got a lot of chiming in. And anybody who would like to connect with us, you're more than welcome to call in. The number here is 862-621-9536. So make sure you guys call in with your comments or your messages or any questions that you guys might have for myself and Wanda. I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you if you want to share a little bit about who you are and why we're here.
Okay. So hi, Fran. And hi, everyone, again. I am affectionately known as Aunt Wanda. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. But today, what we really want to, we want to talk about ways that we can empower women. We've had so many, I want to say, scenarios and incidences, right, going on social media. You know, the R. Kelly situation, and more recently, the whole Tristan, Jordan, and Chloe situation. Mm-hmm. And so while we definitely see things that women do that we may not like as women, we may think that they're at fault, but we have to try to find that way that we can hold them accountable without tearing them down.
Yeah.
We pulled some comments, you know, from Twitter where we're dragging each other, and it's just not necessary. We got to be able to hold them accountable. And
Absolutely.
I think that's why I really appreciated what Jada did, because
Yes. So what did she do?
So she had a conversation with Jordan. She invited her to the Red Table Talk.
So for those of you guys who are unfamiliar, there is a show that goes on Facebook Watch. I'm sure many of our listeners are probably familiar. But Jada Pinkett Smith brings individuals to her red table, and they talk about different topics that are in just going on in the world right now, current events, basically, and gets different perspectives on exactly what that is. So I know, Wanda, you were very kind of passionate about the way it was handled. So if you can go ahead and elaborate on that.
Sure. So I just appreciated the fact that Jada said, you know what, for once, let's get that other side of the story. Mm-hmm. And not to say that the action was right or wrong, but just to get that other side of the story and allow that person to be able to say, you know what, I made a mistake. I want to own it. And we know that when making amends, we want to change the behavior. But initially, Jada held her accountable.
Yeah.
Did you do this? Yes, I did. Are you sorry? Why did you do it? And it just gave another opportunity without tearing her down to hold her accountable and let her tell her side of the story. And again, we don't have to agree with it.
Yeah.
But we don't have to tear each other down either in the process.
Now, I know that there's so many layers of that to kind of unpack in this conversation. So I would like to start from the beginning. So prior to my organization, I was also a school teacher. Mm-hmm. And so there were certain behaviors that I kind of identified and noticed within the classroom setting that I think is kind of where a lot of the female interaction stems from. Mm-hmm. So even as early as in elementary school, we start to notice a difference in social interaction between girls and boys. So boys tend to gather in much larger groups. They participate in team activities, and girls tend to find that 2 or 3 female friends, and they create those close bonds. Mm-hmm. And then once they get to right around that middle school behavior, that's when those bonds turn then into cliques. That's when we start to see that kind of cliquish behavior. And then right around middle school, again, girls start to demonstrate what's known as relational aggression. And that's what we call like that mean girl syndrome, that mean girl behavior. And it often results in our daughters coming home and they're being upset or emotional about something, a social interaction that happened at school. Now, mothers, because we are both mothers of daughters, specifically mothers of daughters, you're mother of 2 grown daughters and a grown son. And I am a mother of 2 young daughters, a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old. And so I think that we, by nature, because mothers are women first, obviously, we are protective, we're evolving, we're learning, and we're constantly giving creatures who may not have been taught ourselves how to effectively deal with conflict. So our reaction is to kind of stick up and protect our girls. Right. So I know that I am not the only one whose initial response to behavior like that is stay away from that girl.
Right.
That's not your friend. Don't let girls treat you that way. And so we kind of subconsciously instill in our girls to retreat.
Yep.
And this gets constantly reinforced. And then by high school, this already complex relationship between girls gets even more competitive and even more complicated.
Right.
And it really starts in the way that we instill in our girls how to kind of effectively interact with one another. Next thing you know, we are grown women tearing each other down.
Yep.
So how do we do it? How do we hold one another accountable without tearing each other down? So go ahead. I'm going to throw it to you. Do you have any suggestions as to how mothers should instill in our girls starting before it gets to the place? And we'll kind of go back into what happened between the whole Jordan Woods and Khloe Kardashian situation. But how do we start even younger than that, kind of instilling in them how to communicate with one another?
So I think that backdrop that you just gave is really critical, because that's part of it. That whole lack of understanding of where that other person might be coming from or what that other person has been through. So we have to always kind of start from that place of not knowing, especially as we're grown-ups, because while you and I can be friends, we can hang out together, but a lot of times we don't always know what inner struggles are. And like you just said, with women, we are so hard on each other that it's really difficult sometimes for us to be able to say, you know what, I'm hurting, because we're fearful of being judged.
Yeah.
And especially now with social media, because people can say an attack and retreat. Just like you said, they can retreat. They can sit at home, sit on their phone, sit on the computer, and they can go crazy.
Keyboard thugs.
Thank you. Keyboard thugging, you know. And so then you see that battle on Facebook or, you know, on Instagram. So I think it really has to start from a place of understanding that I'm not trying to see who's right or wrong. I'm trying to see who's different. And especially if we're talking about a younger woman and an older woman type of situation.
Absolutely.
Then I need to be able to say, okay, I made mistakes too. Now, let me be clear. I want to do a disclaimer, because you know women are listening to us. Let's keep it real, right? Really? Who do you think you're talking to, Wanda?
Yeah.
But, you know, they're already starting on us, but it's okay. So let me give my disclaimer that to say that I don't judge or haven't judged another woman would be a flat out lie. To say that I haven't side-eyed something, I absolutely do. What I've learned from my own experience, though, is that I don't have to share it. I don't have to attack. I have my go-to people, you know, and you're one of them. That I can say, Fran.
Hey, I'm Wanda.
Hey, Fran. You know, that I can say, wow, I just heard, and it really rubbed me the wrong way. But that doesn't mean that I have to go on social media or any place, you know, and intentionally attack that person. I can have a conversation about infidelity, about cheating, about betrayal, about domestic violence without attacking someone specifically. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. Let's get to that place where we can talk about the issue and not the person.
Yeah, and I also think we have to take into consideration the generational difference in exactly what's happening, because my generation, and not even my generation, younger than my generation, that's where they go. They know to go to social media.
Right.
And then you have a whole nother generation that just thinks that this whole social media thing is absolutely ridiculous. Right. And why do you feel that it is a place or a platform for your problems?
Exactly.
And so there really is that disconnect. And oftentimes we are kind of coming at individuals from our perspective. We're
Right.
not coming at them from their perspective, from a child's perspective.
Exactly.
And so we're kind of like, well, you should have, you could have handled it differently. Well, no, you handled it differently.
Right.
You could have handled it differently.
Right.
But I'm doing what it is that I know to do.
Yep.
So I know that there were a lot of back and forth tweets between Khloe Kardashian and Jordan Woods. And we're going to give a little bit of the backstory. We don't want to spend our entire time here
Right.
talking about that or those individuals, but we would like to talk about the way in which the situation was handled. And so I know they directly went to social media. And so it played out for the world to see.
Right.
And it allowed for other individuals to come in and just kind of jump on board, choose sides.
Exactly.
And just go at these women as if they were personal friends of theirs.
Exactly. And that's a key point, Fran, that personal friends. It always just cracks me up when I see people speak about celebrities, and I don't know who knows who, right? But to hear them speak about celebrities as if they really understand or know.
Yeah.
And both Khloe and Jordan were dragged for different reasons, and accomplishing what? What was really accomplished by doing that?
Yeah, nothing. Nothing, because at the end of the day, I do think we also have to really look at the big picture here. And so let's just go back for a moment.
Okay.
So what exactly happened? So let's talk about what happened first. We have, as everybody knows, Khloe Kardashian, one of the biggest celebrities out there. And then we have someone who is a little less well-known, which would be Jordan Woods.
And younger.
And much younger.
Much younger.
And we really have to pinpoint that.
Much younger. That's a generation gap right there.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I know that there's the millennials, and then there's, I guess, the cusp millennials. I guess that would be me. I don't quite feel millennial-ish, but I guess if you technically break down the years, I am still in that generation. And so, but there's a difference between the 30-somethings and the 20-somethings.
Absolutely.
And so when the whole situation played out, it was put on social media as if it were this huge, ginormous event that took place.
Right.
We want to keep it clean for the viewers, but it was initially set out as if there was some sexual activity there.
Right.
And then it wasn't until Jada Pinkett Smith gave her a platform to actually share her side of things that we learned that the behavior was not quite that serious.
Right.
Very little in that conversation, in that dialogue, did I hear anyone really bring up Tristan's name.
Right.
We didn't really hear Tristan Thompson all that much.
Right.
However, we hear Jordan Woods, we hear Khloe Kardashian, we hear the comments of Larsa Pippen, we hear Malika coming to her defense. And so we have to keep on topic of who exactly is to blame.
Right.
And then why are we coming to, it's almost as if people were justifying his behavior because it wasn't the first time.
Right.
But they were ridiculing a young girl for making a mistake that many of us have made in our early 20s.
Right.
So let's talk generationally. Where do you think the issue kind of started as far as the difference in age and the way that the situation was handled, the way that the communication was between Khloe Kardashian, who is a much older, I wouldn't say much older, but who's older.
She's older.
And then Jordan, who is 21. Where was your mentality at 21?
Yeah. Well, so when I was 21 years old, I really didn't care what anybody thought. But at the same time, and again, this goes back to what you said earlier, based on my upbringing up to the point of me being 21 years old, there was a lot of things that I didn't even have a concept about. Right or wrong, boundaries, that kind of thing. I didn't have that concept because by the time I was 21 years old, I had already been through some stuff.
Yeah.
So my approach to certain things was probably going to be very different from someone who did not have those same experiences. So for me, when I looked at this particular situation, I didn't immediately think about the communication or that age difference. What I thought about was the celebrity. What I thought
Okay.
about was, this is the way that it is because of who these people are.
Yeah.
Because there's a Khloe Kardashian, a Jordan Woods, and a Jada Pinkett Smith in all of our lives. So, but they became up to the forefront because of who they are. And so I think that's part of it too, because we lose those, those personal human instincts where we're talking about communication and we're talking about trying to just humanize this situation because the celebrity gets in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why I've just appreciated what Jada did. Now, whether or not that was the whole story, to me, it doesn't matter. It was a platform where she was able to take account, to be accountable in her own words for her actions.
Yeah.
And was able to say, I'm sorry, in her own words for her actions. And so now we move forward. But the problem is that that still wasn't good enough.
Well, no,
it wasn't good enough.
You still had people chiming in
Because
not even after she said what she said, that was still
wasn't
ridiculed.
enough.
Yeah.
And then Jada was, well, how come? Why is Jada all in the mix? Well, see, there you go. You don't know the history that they have with her.
Yeah, because I had no idea. That was a learning lesson for me, that she
had
was
no idea
that her father was who he was in the scenario of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and that they had a relationship since Willow and what's his name?
Well, no, Jaden and Kylie.
Yes, Jaden and Kylie.
Right.
But I mean, they were showing pictures of them as toddlers together.
Now you have an aunt and uncle situation. You basically have a family situation where they're saying, okay, now you know you were wrong. Like, that's the auntie, right?
Yeah.
Now you know you were wrong, but we need to talk about it, and I don't need to beat you up. This is a lesson to learn, because I know if I do something and you attack me, well, first of all, I'm not going to learn anything, because like you said, we're going to become defensive.
Yeah.
So the communication is so important. The delivery of it is what's important.
Okay.
You know, we can have our opinions about it, but when it comes to women, it's just so important for us to give each other a break.
Now, why do you think that we are so difficult on one another? If we can just unpack that for a moment, because really that is what we're discussing today. You know, take Jordan Woods and Khloe Kardashian completely out of the equation, because these scenarios happen, you know, on Central Ave, on MLK Boulevard. I mean, these are everyday scenarios. It's not that they are unique to these two individuals.
Correct.
This happens all the time. And oftentimes, you know, the result of this, it goes down.
Yep.
It goes down.
It goes down.
And so why do you think that we as women are just so critical of one another?
So I think that, again, it becomes situational. I think that women are critical about certain things and not about other things based on their own personal experiences. So, and I'll use me as an example, because you know that my platform is about domestic violence. So I'm a victim advocate. So when I hear the victim shaming, like, it just really it just makes me see red.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
However, again, for me to say that I don't second guess or side eye or judge, it's just not true. It's just that I've learned from my experience that I can be more empowering and I can help someone grow if I approach them and meet them where they are. So if I see a behavior, I need to try to understand why you did it, because that way I can help you to try to change the behavior, and vice versa. I want somebody to tell me if I'm doing something wrong. I think, but as women,
do we?
No, we don't. we don't always.
Because I think it sounds good to say, I want someone to hold me accountable and correct my behavior.
Right.
And if I'm, make a mistake, I want someone to hold my back to the fire and be like, this is what you did. But then when we have that person in our life who actually does that and takes on that role, we're defensive about it.
Right.
So I think it's a double-edged sword. Do we really want someone to correct our mistakes?
Right.
Or do we want people to kind of go along to get along?
And I think for the most part, it depends on the situation, because if I'm headstrong on something, I don't know that you're going to be able to change my mind. I might have to bump my head.
Yeah.
But the challenge is making sure that as women, we give each other a safe place to fall. I need to be able to say, okay, Fran, I don't think you should do that. And you need to be able to say, you know what, Aunt Wanda, you might be right. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to be right here in case you fall, as opposed to, I told you not to do it.
So.
I told you so. And I think that there's jealousy. I think that there's lack of understanding. Just that human nature to judge something or to question something that we don't understand is really hard to say why we do it. And I think that's why we kind of put that question out right to the listeners, like, why do we do it? And why can't we find that way to hold each other accountable without tearing each other down? And I want to just read one of the comments
that
I got from the question this morning. So Flora said, speaking truth with love and a bottle of wine. I ain't mad at you.
Wine.
I ain't mad at you, Flora. Thank you for your comment. And then Cheryl Moses came back and she said, yes, and the willingness to be open to the truth being spoken, like you just said. So we need to be able to be open to getting feedback if we want to be able to give feedback lovingly. And because Cheryl says too, I want someone to pull my coat if they think I need it rather than talking behind my back.
Yeah.
In doing, we must be aware that everyone isn't a true friend either. It can be tricky. And I think that that's really true, Cheryl. Like, that kind of summed it up, because it can be tricky.
Very tricky.
And that's why I use the word situational. We have to take each situation as it comes and try to approach it from a place of understanding and not judging. Like I always say with the Not Just October, listen, believe, and support. And if we can try to frame it within that, let me listen to you. Let me believe what you're saying, and not believe it because I think you're lying, but just believe it because you're speaking your truth to the best of your ability. And then let me come alongside you and support you in the way that's going to help you.
Yeah, and a lot of this really goes back to the way that we kind of instill it in our kids. I mean, It really starts young, and molding them and shaping them to be open to criticism, to be open to constructive criticism rather, and to kind of have that ability to communicate with another young girl, another young lady, in a way that's effective. And I don't think that we really emphasize effective communication. It's kind of, every now and again, it'll be a class, from a mass communication major, but it's not instilled kind of on a day-to-day. And when they're not given an opportunity to express their perspective or point of view, and then have no choice but to listen to someone else's perspective and point of view, and also understanding that we really all come into the world with our own set of stuff.
That's very
true. We all
true.
come in here with stuff.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
life is really just kind of sorting through and shuffling through the stuff.
Absolutely.
And I know I went to one of your events many years ago, and it never left me. You never know who you're sitting next to.
Right. That's right.
And so I just want to pause this for just a moment and talk a little bit more about what is Not Just October, because it was a quote that stuck with me. It was a very emotional kind of dialogue of women telling their stories. And you couldn't tell, you can never tell by looking around the room who's experienced what.
Right.
And so there was, you were very clear on, do not judge, because you just do not know who you're sitting next to.
Right.
And then I was sitting next to a woman who shared her story.
Right.
And I would have never known. So
Right.
What exactly is Not Just October?
So Not Just October came about. I am a survivor of domestic violence and a domestic violence awareness advocate. And so Not Just October came about as just another way to have a conversation about domestic violence, because what I found is that it's a very tough topic. People don't like to talk about it. However, they will listen. They will sit and watch, or they'll sit and listen. So Not Just October was actually a stage play, like you said, that featured 12 women with their 12 stories. And we kind of went through scenarios about safety planning, warning signs, and how you can help someone. But every time that we have those events, there's always someone that raises their hand and says, "Me too." And I hear that all the time. What? So-and-so raised their hand? I had no idea. No, because whether it's domestic violence, whether it's infidelity, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's cancer, whatever it is that someone is going through, you don't know by looking at them. And most of the time, people react or respond to situations based on their personal experience. So if I don't know you, like really know you, then I'm going to look at certain behaviors and be like, well, what's wrong with her? Instead of saying, wow, I wonder what's wrong with her. There's even a difference in the way you say it. I can say what's wrong with her, but it's the way that I say it.
And I wanted to kind of zone in on that, because in those situations where women are in relationships or scenarios of that nature, we're the ones that are judging them. They're not being judged by, Jimmy down the street. They're being judged by their fellow counterparts who are females, and by their peers. Of how dumb can she be? How long does she need to endure this before, whatever. So even in those scenarios, how can we kind of raise one another up without coming across in judgment?
I think one of the first things that we really need to do with ourselves is be able to admit that we don't know everything.
That's hard.
I know, right? But we need to be able to admit when we see a situation that makes us uncomfortable, because we generally attack because we're uncomfortable. Okay. I'm going to attack you because I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to attack you because I see that behavior in me. I'm not changing, so you need to change. Right? So we need to be able to say, okay, that situation, and I'm just going to use Chloe and Jordan just as a backdrop, but that situation makes me uncomfortable because I experienced that before. We need to be able to start with us. Before I start to have a conversation or make a comment about something that another woman has done, I need to understand first, how is this affecting me? Is it making me sad? Is it making me angry? Is it making me depressed? What is causing me to react this way? So we need to start with ourselves, because that's really what we're approaching that situation based on a personal experience, a personal opinion. And so now I'm going to attack because I don't understand it.
Because that's what we do. We project.
We project.
Guilty.
Guilty.
That's
so
guilty.
What we do. So guilty. Right? So, and this is, again, I learned this from talking about other women and seeing the harm that I caused. I've learned it from being the object of the conversation and feeling left out, feeling just unworthy. And so my reactions turned into being self-destructive, right? Because of being the object of it. So as a result of that, now I just try my best to not do that. And when I see it being done, I try to address it if I'm able to. And with social media, it's really hard. It's just really hard.
It
and
is.
It's really hard. But to your point, I think that it really starts with us. It just starts. It starts with you.
I mean, I think we've kind of all been guilty of, and it's so much easier when you are surrounded by other individuals who do the same thing. So when you are, picking on somebody, and then your homegirl to the right is also picking on them, and your homegirl to the left is also picking on them, it just makes it so much easier to be evil and to have that relational aggression, that mean girl syndrome. And then what I find, especially when I deal with the students, is that when you isolate the girls and speak to them on a one-on-one, they really don't necessarily feel that way.
Exactly.
But it really goes back to that phrase that there's power in numbers. You feel empowered to be mean.
Yep.
You know, and so we really, the goal here is to kind of change the narrative so that we don't feel empowered to be mean, but that we do feel empowered to empower one another in a more productive way, so that we can make comments to one another and hold each other to where we are falling short.
Right.
And then kind of help one another get to a place. I think we kind of forget that we're not all on the same page when it comes to this thing of evolution and evolving. And even if somebody is way past where you think they should be in their process, it doesn't mean that that is where they are.
That's so true.
You know, and
that's so true.
there'll be. I mean, we met someone at a panel that you did, Aunt Wanda, and the young girl, 10 years old.
Right.
10 years old. I mean, she was speaking truth.
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
She was speaking truth, and she was wise beyond her years.
Yes,
and
she was.
And smarter than and more self-aware than some adults that I know.
Right.
And so to see that lets me know that, you know, we're just not all where we should be. Because how should a 10-year-old be more self-aware
and it spoke
than a 30-something?
Exactly. And it really spoke to some of the experiences that she may have already seen and gone through that's causing her to already have this thought process at 10 years old.
Absolutely.
You know, and I want to put this challenge out there, and that for the next week or so, not even a week, but just in the next couple of days, I want to put this challenge out there that if you see a young lady or a woman or something do an action or make a comment or whatever that you don't like, try having a conversation without using that person's name. Try having a conversation about, I know, right? About, you know, talking about, you know, because we just did it. We had a conversation about being able to communicate. We touched a little bit about domestic violence. We touched a little bit about infidelity. We didn't have to mention anyone's name in the context of dragging them. And we were still able to have a conversation about some issues. Yeah. So I challenge everyone to do that. And one thing really quick, Fran, on the comments that some of the people wrote, there were key words, and it's kind of what we were talking about. Being open and honest without being hypocritical, receiving honest feedback and understanding. Like, those are key words: honesty, understanding. So if I'm going to have a conversation with you about something that maybe you did or said that I didn't like, I need to really be able to be 100% honest about how I'm feeling, because if I'm not honest, I'm not going to get the help that I need if I'm giving you this scenario when it's really not that scenario. It's really this scenario. So now we just kind of start this vicious cycle. So I think we're definitely a work in progress, and I don't know that that we have all of the answers. We don't have any of the answers. Any of them. Right. We really don't have any. See, I want to say,
but that's exactly why we need this dialogue. Because
absolutely.
We don't know how to hold one another accountable. We're doing it through our actions,
right?
But we don't have a manuscript that's like, okay, this is what we're going to come on here and we're going to preach about, is that we're going to do this and these are the bullet points. But we know that there has to be a better. We do know that much,
right?
That there has to be a better way that we can handle this as women, as young women going into older women. There has to be a better way to communicate with one another so that we can kind of hold each other's feet to the fire without having to drag one another in the process. I do want to go ahead and read one of the comments that came to me from Hanifa. Hey, Hanifa.
Okay.
So Hanifa writes, I believe that we as women should try to support and encourage as much as possible, especially because the disrespect by men is at an all-time high. Me personally, I feel like we have to understand that not all women are alike. And that is to your point, that we all come from these different places. You can't feel like because someone doesn't handle things or do certain things the way that you do or do not gives you a right to judge or to discourage. And I think it's a big problem with women when it comes to supporting and uplifting one another. Another thing, most people listen to one another just to be nosy or to judge versus being a listening ear or a system of support. Right. And I think that's really important. I want to jump back to one of the first things that she mentioned, is that the disrespect from men really is at an all-time high. I mean, I was scrolling through something on Facebook this morning, and I don't even want to mention what the image was. But it was something that pertained to the town in which we grew up. And people who live in the neighborhood began to chime in, and some were kind of there in a joking way. Others were very upset that the picture was kind of circulating in the first place. And automatically, one of the men who were commenting was referring to another female who was commenting in opposing point of views. And he just began to call her a bitch. Just in the comments.
Wow.
And I'm like, that was his initial reaction to them having opposing point of views. And so how do we do that? How do we make it, it's, if we see it on this end and we're not sticking up for one another, it becomes so normalized.
Right.
So I do think that is a key point. Also, just kind of running it back to the schools, I was speaking to a group of girls a few months back, and they were telling me about a fight that they had all had. And as they're running down the names who were involved in the fight, a boy's name came up in the fight.
Wow.
And I was completely floored that no one seemed to be alarmed. It was almost like, well, that was his sister. Well, that was his guy. So that was his cousin.
Right.
So, of course, he jumped in.
Right.
And so here we go again with that. We're already getting it from over here.
Right.
Why are we making it worse on one another by doing it internally? I don't see men interacting in this same way.
They don't. I mean, let me not make a blanket statement. Maybe some men do. Okay. But for the most part, men are they compartmentalize things. Whereas women, we are, we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, right? I mean, we take care of the babies, we cook, we go to work, and this is not to say that men
get
don't
back to business.
Yes,
Sorry.
right.
Hey,
Who run the world? And not to say that men don't do that, so please don't put words in my mouth. But what I'm saying is that generally men can compartmentalize things. So if they're working, that's what they're doing. They're working. If they're cooking, they're cooking. When we're cooking, we're thinking about the work. We're probably changing a diaper. So women, because we're nurturers by nature, right? So with men, if they get into a disagreement or they get into an argument, they have the argument. And then that's it. Then they're done. Women, we're just not like that. We hold on to stuff. So
do you think that is something that is like in our DNA, or is that learned behavior? Because why can't we be more like that? Why can't we kind of, observe that behavior and attempt to mimic it? Because it really would be more empowering to one another.
I don't think that. I don't know that it's. I don't know if it's like DNA. I don't really know. If it's DNA, if it's learned behavior. I would probably lean more towards learned behavior. And I don't. I think that a lot of it has to do with. I'm gonna say it. I think a lot of it has to do with the pressures that women have. There is a higher level of expectation for us to succeed, to be, to do, to have, from the way we look to our jobs to the cars that we drive. I think that there's just a higher expectation for women. And some of it is self-imposed. Some of it is as a result of being dragged, right? Or having certain comments made about us. Well, now I go into this mindset, well, I have to prove you wrong. I have to one-up you. And I don't think that men generally have that because their sphere, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's just limited in terms of what their expectation, because they're a man. So men go to work and they take care of the family, and that's kind of it for them in that, for lack of a better word, bubble. But with women, we have to bear the children. So first we have to carry them. Like I'm being like we have to carry them. Then we bear them. Then we take care of them and the house and the family and the man and possibly work. So there's a lot of pressure on us, and our expectations, I think, I won't say they're more. Let me rephrase that. They're different. Okay. The expectations are different. And so if I see a woman who is kind of along the same lane as I'm in, doing better than me, or what I perceive to be doing it better than me, well, automatically I don't like you.
And I want to pinpoint on that word perception.
Yes.
And perceive, because I think that's major, especially when we're kind of dealing with this millennial generation, because all of our perception is based off of social media and what we see. And so we have, as we all know, social media is a liar, and we only put up on there what we want the world to believe and to think of us.
Right.
And so we're constantly comparing our situations with the next person. Even if we don't know them from Adam,
right,
we are comparing ourselves to what the perception is of someone. And 9 times out of 10, I've spoken at a lot of women's panels. I've done my best to network in a lot of women's groups. And, the underlining thread is typically the same. There's a struggle. There's a struggle in there. We all are kind of going through our own struggles and trying to figure it out. But you wouldn't know that based on the perception that's put out there.
Correct.
And so we're looking at images of individuals and their trips or their newest whatevers, their clothes, the way that they look, the way that they act. And we're kind of judging them based on the perception that they're specifically putting out there,
right,
for us to see.
Right.
And so we're not really getting an understanding of what's going on the back end.
Right.
And it kind of reinforces that that nature to be quick to judge.
Right.
So just like you said, if this person appears to be doing better than I am, and we're pretty much in the same lane.
Right.
But you're up here and I'm back here.
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Right. And then if I ask you, because I've had personal experiences with women on social media that have a certain platform, if you will, that I've reached out to because of the platform that they had and because I needed help in that area. Mm-hmm. But what I got back was not what you're putting, right? So this is my experience, right? So now as a woman, I go, so now do I put her on blast? Because you say you do this. I just reached out to you about that and you are not helping me. So is it me? Is it me? Like, so to me, this was a dynamic where it really made me stop and go, okay, now, is this a situation where she hasn't had an issue with me because of a perception and said, well, I'm not helping her? Mm-hmm. Or are you perpetrating your...
Are you a fraud?
Right, or your platform for your purpose? Because there's a difference. Some people,
absolutely.
Some people have a platform that they want, but is it a platform or is it a purpose? They're not the same. So I shouldn't say that, but the point is that perception is very real. And I don't think it's wrong to ask a question. I don't think it's wrong if I see something and I go, hey, Fran, I saw you posted or you mentioned or whatever. What did you mean by that? Or how can, ask a question. But a lot of times we don't ask.
No.
Because we know everything. So, if I see it, and like you said, if you put it up there, then it must be real and you must have meant that. So I'm just going to go with that instead of asking. And that's why I say that I think a lot of that initial approach to a certain situation always starts with us. I always have to check my motives. I have to check my motives because I have to always check my motives. And I have those people that I call. And at some point you've been one of them where I've said, okay, friend, here's the situation. This is what I think it is. And I have to get somebody else's perspective to help me because I will wreck myself when I get in my feelings, because we're emotional. Women are emotional.
Yeah, I wanted to, so I have another comment that came in, and I don't want to butcher it up, but Rozbaj 246. So she had mentioned that if some women learn to love and embrace themselves and their flaws, they can share and uplift and help one another instead of throwing shade towards one another. She said that it really bothers her that they compare themselves to celebrities. And she just kind of encourages everyone to kind of be authentically who you are and that God made us all different.
That's right.
And so I like what she said because I think we do we all have these things that we don't necessarily love. I'm not going to say we don't like, but we don't love about ourselves. And when we see that someone else appears to not have a flaw, even though we know that we all have them, someone else appears to not have any flaws, we automatically are kind of defensive towards that person.
Yeah.
I know a lot of young ladies can kind of relate. Oh, we have a caller. Bring him in. Hello, caller.
Hey.
Hi, welcome to Gem Talk.
Good. I love your show. I'm actually listening right now, and I have a personal question I want to ask.
Yes. Is it for me or for Aunt Wanda?
The whole Michael B. Jordan thing.
Michael B. Jordan, yes. Okay.
With the white woman, blah, 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 blah. So I just want to ask you, ladies, how do you feel about the comment? Why do black women feel so hurt when they see black men with white women? I personally just need to know why.
I think that this is a generational. I think that the difference in generations does play a part in it. So I'm going to throw it to Aunt Wanda first for her perspective, and then I'll chime in and let you know what I think. So go ahead, Aunt Wanda. Why do you feel that black women get so upset to see a gentleman of color dating a white woman or a woman who is not of their own, race?
All right, my brother, you would do okay. All right, so I'm gonna answer this from my perspective.
That's all we ask.
Okay, because I think that black women who have that challenge have it for different reasons.
Okay.
But I think fundamentally, I want to say it has to do with the fact that white women, generally speaking, seem to have it better. They seem to have it easier. They seem to be able to get places and do places. They appeared. It seems to be that they are better, and I don't mean. I'm literally using air quotes that they're better, and so we feel that it's a slap in the face. We feel that it's a disrespect because they have it easier. We have to struggle a little bit more. We have to do things a little bit harder. Things come a little bit easier to them, from their upbringing to the jobs that they get to their hair. Like, I mean, I'm just right.
You're right.
To their hair.
Do you feel black women are threatened, or
I think some are, yes. I would say that, yes, I think some are threatened. I think some feel that white women do not necessarily have a black man's best interest.
Or can't understand their journey.
Or can't understand their journey. And I think that some black men, some of the reasons may be because it's an easier road for them. They're able to get into doors that they may not have been able to get into. So I say all that to say that I think that this is also situational. But I think that, yes, I think that some black women are threatened by it. I think some just don't like it because they're white, and because white men,
keep it real.
Yeah, because white men were disrespecting to black women from day one. Mm-hmm. So I think that depending on, like you said, Fran, depending on the generation, depending on your experience, is going to depend on why you have issue with it.
And I think we also, I also want to kind of include into this conversation what Nick Cannon said not that long ago on a podcast that he was a guest on. And he made a comment that there are some, and I'm not speaking for black men, but there are some black men who kind of have it as getting with a white woman or marrying a white woman or having babies by a white woman is kind of like a stature thing. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, you've gotten to a certain place in your life once you have a white woman. And so there are men that do feel that way. And if we look into history and we look into different individuals in, even if let's just talk entertainment industry or just in the sports world, right? Mm-hmm. They get to a certain stature and then they kind of transition over and end up marrying or having children with a white woman. So, but just in terms of kind of the younger generation, I do feel that myself and many, many, many other educators in the schools are teaching the younger kids tolerance. And so I do see a shift in that. I don't think that just kind of based on the groups that I've worked with in high school in particular, they don't feel the same way about the differences in color. They don't see it the same way that we do. Just like they don't look at dating the same way we do. They don't look at communicating. They don't mind a text message as opposed to an actual phone call or like a knock at the door. Exactly. That used to be a thing. You used to have to call someone's home to get in contact with them. Now you just shoot them a text or, you Snapchat and they respond. And so I think we're getting to a shift now. And so it's not quite looked at. I think it's going to be a lot more open these days. I mean, you're going to see it a lot more. I mean, we almost have to accept it as the norm because that's kind of the direction that we're going. And because there's less and less, we have so much dividing in our political world, but there's so little dividing in our humanity world. We don't really see black and white that much anymore unless you're in certain areas because there's so much integrating. And so there's so many biracial or mixed people of different races. And so those are the children that are in this next generation coming up. So I don't think it's going to be as, I don't like that. I can't stand that anymore. But we're still in it. It's going to take a couple generations to kind of get that out before, this next generation coming up is a lot more tolerant of not feeling like, black men just belong to black women.
Right.
So if that's being said, I got another question. Let's see. Do you think interracial dating, interracial couple is the first key or the first step to stop racism?
To stop racism? Oh, that's loaded.
Wait, that might be episode 5 of Gem Talk.
I think there's a lot of things that need to be done to stop racism, but
would it be
I think that you can be purebred, not that any of us are, but you can be purebred and be taught because as we know, children aren't brought into this world with hatred or racism. Those are learned behaviors.
That's learned behavior.
Yeah, so it's not going to take an intermixing. And then you have people who are of a certain race that do not like their own race.
Right.
And so it's not going to take intermixing of races. It's going to take.
Like this. We'll more stop the whole black and white thing, the whole black and white going back at each other thing.
So again, I think that it's situational. And if you're talking about interracial couples, then you have to be talking about attraction.
The whole world.
You're talking about attraction. You're talking about, what am I attracted to? What do I love? So that's a little bit more of a personal and a smaller scale than racism, because I could have an issue, but I could walk out of this podcast today, walk outside and run into a white man and fall madly in love. I mean, I'm just saying. So if we're talking about coupling, right? Then now we're talking about what am I attracted to, and what am I attracted to? So I think that that's a little bit more personal. That's on a more personal level than racism, because like you said, I could still be racist and be with, I'm just
no, absolutely,
because that's a mindset, and that's learned behavior. So that's a big question. That's a good question. That's a big question. You write that question down, Fran?
I got it.
We might tackle that. Yeah. We might tackle that one.
But thank you for calling in. We really appreciate the support. Thank you for calling in to Gen Talk. And we love a male's perspective. So we really appreciate you. We are going to begin to wrap this up. So I do want to leave with just some kind of just some key points that we want to focus on. So again, just to go back over what our topic was for today, is how do we as women hold one another accountable without tearing each other down? And just some little things that I think that we need to kind of begin to look at is that we do have to teach our girls at an early age to be confident in their own abilities and to not compare themselves to their peers. And when our daughters come home with conflict, whether it be, emotional things that happen at school, or they're just in that age group, because it happens, it's going to happen, that we as women and as mothers, we cannot solve their problems, and we have to offer them a listening ear as opposed to trying to kind of solve their issues for them from an adult's perspective.
Right.
We also have to be real about friendships and the fact that you're going to experience conflict in friendships, and it doesn't mean stay away from that girl, because I think that that's kind of our initial reaction as parents, is we want to separate as opposed to kind of teaching them how to walk it through and how to get on the other side of it. I think also another thing that we can kind of do is to delegate either a family member, a close friend, or a mentor to help sort some of those issues out. I think we as parents, we're too close, and so we're too emotionally invested. And so our automatic response again is just to protect. Right. And so if we can kind of infuse someone else, an auntie, a godmother, a cousin, someone else into that role for just a moment, they might be able to offer suggestions and advice, a little bit from a distance, and allow that child to kind of navigate and not kind of take over, because I feel like we do a lot of taking over. Wanda, do you have any key points that you want to kind of highlight?
I think that, like you said, with our young girls, we just need to approach them differently. And, like I said, I think understanding where we are and why we feel a certain way about something that we see. So, did this make me sad? Did this make me angry? Did this depress me? Like, what's my feeling about this before I go and try to approach it with someone else? And being honest about what we feel, being honest about what we don't understand, being honest about what we don't like, and then also putting ourselves in that position to be able to receive that feedback as well. Openly, and understanding that, people have different perspectives, and they generally react or respond based on their personal experiences, which we don't always know what those experiences are. So, I'm always listen, believe, and support, and try to have that conversation without using the person, address the behavior that you don't like, address the topic, but not the person. We just don't have to be mean.
Yeah, and a lot of this just comes with growth. I mean, some of it's going to take some work, some personal work. So I just want to kind of stay out there, ladies and gentlemen, do your work, do your work on yourself so that you can get to a place where you are able to do those things that Aunt Wanda had just kind of gone over for us. We really appreciate everybody listening to us today.
Thank you so
on
much.
Gem Talk. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is jerseyfreshtv.com. Click subscribe. And again, this is episode 1. So we are wrapping up episode 1 on Wanda.
We did it.
Woo! Yes, we did.
And we will be back.
Yes, we will. All right. Peace, guys. Until next time, Gem Talk. Hashtag Gem Talk.
Take good care of yourself.
I'm a perfect blend.